That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Monday, January 26, 2026. If you were listening to this, you've successfully navigated the first few weeks of the new year. Or maybe you're currently hunkered down avoiding that ice storm, which, believe me, we were definitely going to have to talk about, because apparently even the word ice has become a political minefield today.
It really has. It's one of those days where the news cycle feels like it was put together by a chaos theory algorithm or something.
A chaos algorithm. I like that.
We are looking at things that are, just unimaginably small, hiding inside our own bodies, and then at the same time, things that are incomprehensibly massive at the very edge of the universe.
And then the very messy, very human drama happening right here in the middle of it all.
Exactly.
I was looking into the stack of research you sent over this morning, and the theme that really jumped out at me is this weird tension, this push and pull between expansion and contraction.
Oh, how so?
Well, we're navigating a world where our understanding of biology is exploding. I mean, it's literally being redefined inside our own mouths. And at the same time, the stars are getting more crowded than a rush hour freeway.
But down here on Earth.
But down here on Earth, the geopolitical map feels like it's shrinking. It feels like nations are turning inward. Walls are going up,
That is a perfect way to frame it. It's a total split-screen reality.
Right.
On one screen, you've got scientific discovery just blowing the doors off what we thought we knew.
Wow.
Finding these obelisks in our DNA, black holes breaking the speed limits of physics. It's incredible.
And on the other screen,
On the other, you have the Pentagon's new strategy, the trade wars, the homeland defense pivot. It's all about consolidation, protection, battening down the hatches.
so here's the roadmap for how we're going to navigate this collision course today. We're going to start with the expansion, the really mind-bending science. We have a Stanford study that claims there's a new life form, if we could even call it that, hiding inside the human gut and mouth.
And they're calling them obelisks.
Obelisks. And it's not a virus, it's not bacteria.
It's something else entirely. And
Yeah.
the craziest part, as you hinted at, you probably have them in your mouth right now as you're listening.
That is deeply unsettling. We will get to the bottom of that.
Uh-huh.
And we're zooming way out. The James Webb Space Telescope.
The JWST, yeah.
It's watching black holes behave very badly in the early universe. Plus, we have a major, and I mean a major, update on the Artemis II mission. We actually have a launch window.
Which is so exciting. Then we're going to pivot to the technological horizon. There are some very strong rumors swirling about a collaboration between Apple and Google,
The two giants.
the two giants working together. It could change how we use our phones as soon as next month. And on top of that, a reality check for the entire AI industry. We're calling it the profitability test.
The free ride is over.
Oh, it's definitely over, and the bill is coming due.
We will also do some rewriting of history. We've got Renaissance medicine involving hippo teeth,
Yes, actual hippo teeth.
giant hopping kangaroos,
Yeah.
and a total rewrite on the origins of syphilis that, it completely vindicates Christopher Columbus, at least on that one specific chart.
On that one chart, yes. And then we have to talk about the contraction, the global shift. There's a major pivot in the U.S. national defense strategy regarding China and the homeland that suggests the entire era of American power projection might be changing.
A huge deal. Plus, the latest on the Greenland purchase saga, which just refuses to go away.
It never does.
And then the immediate crises, that massive winter storm paralyzing the U.S. and the breakdown of peace talks in Ukraine.
So our mission today isn't just to, read the headlines, it's to connect the dots. What is the link between ancient DNA, modern AI economics, and the way nations are posturing for war?
There's always a link. Let's dive in. Okay, let's unpack this obelisk discovery first, because I feel like I need to wash my mouth out just talking about it. This comes from a study at Stanford University. What exactly are we looking at here?
So this is one of those discoveries that just makes you realize how much we still don't know about our own biology. I mean, it's truly humbling.
How so?
Essentially, researchers were scanning through these massive, and I mean enormous amounts of genetic data from the human microbiome.
So the community of microbes living inside us, the bacteria, the fungi.
Exactly, all the little passengers we carry around. And as they sifted through this data, they kept finding these bits of genetic material that didn't match anything. Not human, not bacterial, not viral, nothing in the databases.
They were just blank spots in the map.
Complete blank spots, and they are calling them obelisks because of their shape when they're computationally modeled.
And what is that shape? What does it look like?
They are these tiny rod-like structures. And they're made of circular RNA.
Okay, let's pause right there. RNA is ribonucleic acid. It's the cousin of DNA. And usually we think of RNA as a messenger, right? Carrying instructions.
Correct. And usually, RNA is a linear strand. Think of it like a piece of thread or a shoelace. It carries instructions from your DNA out to the parts of the cell that make proteins.
A shoelace. Okay.
But that linear form is fragile. Your body is filled with enzymes that are basically a bunch of tiny scissors, and their job is to chop up any stray RNA they find, because a stray piece of RNA often looks like an invading virus.
So the shoelace gets cut. It's a defense mechanism.
Precisely. But these obelisks, they're circular. They've tied the shoelace into a closed loop, a circle.
Like a necklace instead of a string.
That's a great analogy. And it's not just a loop. They twist themselves into this tight, stable, rod-like structure. That shape, that fold, makes them incredibly stable. It protects them from those scissors.
So they don't need a protein shell, the capsid, that viruses use for protection.
Exactly. They're essentially naked genetic code. They've figured out how to survive in the incredibly hostile environment of the human gut and mouth just by folding up correctly.
So they're these stripped-down molecular survivalists. But if they don't have a shell to attach to cells, how are they replicating? A virus hijacks a cell's machinery to make copies. Do these things do the same?
That is the big mystery. We know they're what scientists call viroid-like elements. Now, viroids are these really simple loops of RNA that, until now, we mostly thought just infected plants. You know, potatoes, tomatoes, things like that.
Right, I've heard of that. They can wipe out crops.
They can, but finding something like this in humans and in such high numbers is completely unprecedented.
How high are the numbers? What are we talking about?
The study found them in about 50% of the oral microbiomes they tested.
50%. So a coin flip.
A coin flip. You listening right now, you probably have obelisks in your mouth. They also found them in about 7% of gut samples they analyzed, so they're widespread.
That is fascinating, and as I said, slightly gross. But here's the big question. Are they alive?
Well, that really depends on your definition of life, doesn't it? It's a philosophical question as much as a biological one. They have genes. Specifically, they're RNA codes for a new class of proteins the researchers have named oblins. But here's the kicker. We have zero idea what oblins actually do.
So they carry the blueprint for a protein, but we don't know what that protein builds or does.
Not a clue. Usually a simple viroid in a plant doesn't code for anything. It's just a parasite of a parasite. But obelisks are complex enough to have their own genes, yet they're simple enough to not be a virus. They sit right in this evolutionary blind spot, this gray area between, dead chemistry and a living organism.
It really challenges the definition of life, doesn't it? This gray area.
Precisely. It pushes the boundaries of molecular biology. It suggests there's a kind of shadow biosphere right under our noses, or I guess inside them.
If we miss this for so long,
Yeah.
and it's in half the population, what else is in there?
That's the question that's keeping biologists up at night. Are they parasites? Are they symbiotes that are actually helping us digest food? Are they just passengers enjoying the ride? We just don't know. It's a brand new continent on the biological map.
It's such a humbling thought. We map the entire human genome and think we're done, only to realize we missed an entire class of entities because our filters, our tools, weren't set to look for them.
We were looking for what we expected to see.
Exactly. And that exact same bias, looking only for what fits our models, is what's causing a bit of a crisis in astrophysics right now.
It's a perfect parallel. Just like we missed the obelisks because they didn't fit the neat definition of a virus, the James Webb Space Telescope is showing us that we've been fundamentally wrong about how the early universe grew up.
You're talking about the feeding frenzy data, the stuff about the black holes.
I am. The JWST has been observing black holes in the very, very early universe. We're talking just a few 100 million years after the Big Bang. And it found something that our cosmological models said shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, that's what?
These black holes are growing way, way too fast.
Okay. Hold on, though. We've known about supermassive black holes for a long time. Why is the speedy issue here? Can't a black hole just eat as much as it wants? I mean, if there's a cloud of gas nearby, gravity pulls it in, what's the speed limit?
That's the catch. There is a physical speed limit. It's a real thing, and it's called the Eddington limit.
The Eddington limit. Okay, break that down for us. What is that?
Okay, so think of a black hole eating gas like a person trying to eat a sandwich in a hurricane-force wind tunnel.
Right, I'm with you.
As the black hole's gravity pulls matter in, that matter gets compressed and heated up because of friction. It gets incredibly hot, millions of degrees, and it shines incredibly brightly. We see these as quasars.
So it's the stuff falling in that's shining, not the black hole itself.
Exactly. And that light, that intense radiation, exerts an outward pressure. It's like a wind blowing out from the black hole. So if the black hole tries to eat too fast, the radiation pressure from its own glowing food becomes so strong it actually blows the rest of the food away.
So it chokes on its own dinner. The light from the meal pushes the rest of the meal off the table.
That's a perfect way to put it. It pushes the food off the table. The Eddington limit is that perfect balance point where the force of gravity pulling matter in is exactly matched by the force of the light pushing it out. It's the maximum stable speed a black hole can eat.
But these early black holes, observed by the Webb telescope, they're not following the rules.
They are shredding the rulebook. They're eating about 13 times faster than physics says should be stable. They are super Eddington eaters.
13 times faster. That isn't a small error in the calculation. That is a massive violation of the rules. What does that mean for our understanding of how the universe formed?
Well, it solves one major riddle, but it creates a new one. The riddle it solves is this. We see these giant, supermassive black holes in the modern universe, and we also see them in the very early universe. And we could never figure out how they got so big so quickly if they had to follow the speed limit.
There just wasn't enough time.
Not nearly enough time. But this feeding of frenzy mechanism, this super Eddington accretion, explains it. They gorge themselves early on, growing at an exponential rate and creating these massive energy outputs.
And the new riddle it creates.
A new riddle is how? How are they managing to bypass the Eddington limit so dramatically? It might mean our understanding of accretion disks, of the physics of how matter falls into a black hole, is incomplete. It's forcing everyone back to the drawing board.
And it changes our timeline for how galaxies like our own Milky Way came to be, right?
Absolutely. The old idea was that galaxies formed first, and then black holes grew in their centers. This new data suggests the opposite might be true. It suggests that these supermassive black holes might be the seeds or the gravitational anchors that galaxies then grow around. They come first, not last.
So the monster in the middle of the room actually built the room.
That's looking more and more likely.
Speaking of seeing things we couldn't see before, there was another really cool space story this week. This one comes from the International Center of Radio Astronomy Research, or ICAR. They released a new image of the Milky Way, but it wasn't with visible light.
No, this was using low-frequency radio waves. They call it radio colors, which I think is just a beautiful way to think about it.
Radio colors. Explain that.
Well, our eyes see a tiny, tiny sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum, what we call visible light. But the universe is screaming in all sorts of other wavelengths, X-rays, infrared, and radio waves. This new image maps the galaxy in those low-frequency radio waves, assigning different colors to different frequencies.
So what does that let us see? What's hidden from a normal telescope?
It lets us see through all the dust. The Milky Way is a very dusty place, and that dust blocks visible light, but radio waves pass right through it. So this new image reveals hidden star-forming regions, these stellar nurseries deep inside galactic clouds. And it also shows us the remnants of old explosions, supernova remnants that are otherwise invisible.
So it's like putting on a pair of night vision goggles, but for the history of the entire galaxy.
That's a great way to describe it. You're seeing the ghosts of stars that died millions of years ago.
I love that. Now, let's bring it a little bit closer to home, literally to our cosmic backyard. Because we have a date, a real one. NASA has confirmed the window for Artemis II.
February 6th, 2026. That is the earliest window they're targeting. And this is huge.
It really is. It feels like we've been talking about going back to the moon for my entire adult life. It's always felt like it was 5 years away. But this is the real deal.
The hardware's on the pad, the crew is training, it's happening.
But we should be clear, this isn't the landing mission, right? This isn't boots on the ground just yet.
Correct. This is the crucial test run. It's a 10-day journey. They launch on the SLS, the Space Launch System, that giant orange rocket in the Orion capsule. They'll fly to the moon, loop around the far side, and then come home.
And in doing so, they'll go further into space than any human has been since the Apollo 17 mission.
Over 50 years ago. They'll be testing all the systems, life support, navigation, the heat shield on re-entry. Everything has to work perfectly on this flight before they'll even consider putting humans down on the surface for Artemis III.
And we should talk about who is actually strapping into this rocket. Because this isn't just, a couple of American test pilots. The crew is very specific.
Very specific and very telling of the current geopolitical landscape of space exploration. You have two NASA astronauts, Jessica Meir and Jack Hathaway. They're the Americans on board.
But the other two seats?
The other two are international. You have Sophie Adnot from the European Space Agency, the ESA, and you have Andrei Fedyaev from Roscosmos, the Russian space agency.
The Russian inclusion is fascinating, especially given all the geopolitical tensions we're going to discuss later in the show. It seems like the International Space Station and now Artemis are some of the last places where that U.S.-Russia cooperation is holding steady.
It is, for now. Space diplomacy is a very delicate thing. But Adnot's presence, the European astronaut, is just as crucial, if not more so from a technical standpoint.
Why is that?
A lot of people forget this, but the Orion capsule, the part the astronauts actually sit in, the command module, is American. But the engine, the power systems, the solar arrays, the main life support, that's all in the European service module, which is built by the ESA.
So without Europe, Orion is just a dead tin can. It can't go anywhere.
It's a paperweight. This mission is as much a test of that European hardware as it is of the American capsule. It's a deeply international partnership.
High stakes for everyone involved. And speaking of keeping the crew alive, we saw a report about the team at NASA's Johnson Space Center, Dustin Gomert's team, who are working on the new pressure suits.
These suits are just incredible pieces of individual engineering. For a mission like Artemis, the suit is the final lifeboat. If the cabin were to depressurize for any reason, that suit is the only thing keeping the astronaut alive.
So they have to be perfect.
They've been running these marathon testing sessions to ensure not just survival, but mobility. It's one thing to stay alive in an inflated suit, but you also have to be able to reach the controls, flip the switches, operate the spacecraft. It's like trying to do surgery while wearing an inflatable balloon.
Now, from spaceships going up to space junk coming down, we've discussed the clutter up there in orbit before, but there's a new, really clever way to track it that involves earthquakes.
Yeah, this is a really innovative bit of science. When a piece of space junk, an old satellite, a spent rocket stage, falls back to Earth, it enters the atmosphere at hypersonic speeds. We're talking several times the speed of sound.
And that creates a sonic boom, like a jet breaking the sound barrier.
Exactly, but it's often much higher up and can be even louder. What scientists have realized is that the network of earthquake sensors, seismometers, that are all over the world to detect tectonic shifts can actually hear the acoustic shock wave from these sonic booms hitting the Earth's surface.
So we're using the planet's own ears to listen for things falling out of the sky.
That's a great way to put it. We're listening to the sonic footprint of re-entry. And this is becoming absolutely vital because with projects like Amazon's Project Kuiper and SpaceX's Starlink launching thousands and thousands of new satellites, the sky is getting dangerously crowded. We need to know where this stuff is going to fall.
Speaking of Amazon's Project Kuiper, that brings us neatly into our tech and business section. Because those thousands of satellites, they're causing a bit of a stir, aren't they?
A bit of a stir is putting it very mildly.
Right.
Professional astronomers are furious.
Why? What's the issue?
A new study just came out confirming what they feared. The Project Kuiper satellites are reflecting enough sunlight to significantly disrupt optical astronomy. They're just too bright.
How bright are we talking?
Bright enough that if you are a telescope on a mountaintop, maybe the very large telescope in Chile, and you're trying to take a long exposure picture of a very faint, distant galaxy, maybe looking for those fast-eating black holes we just talked about.
Right.
And a train of these bright Amazon satellites flies across your field of view, the image is ruined. It leaves a bright streak right across your data. It's like someone flashing a camera in a dark room while you're trying to take a picture.
It's the classic conflict, isn't it? The goal of providing global internet coverage for everyone on Earth versus our ability to study the universe from Earth.
It's a huge dilemma, and Amazon is just one player. You have Starlink, you have OneWeb. As these mega constellations grow, we are essentially building a cage of artificial light around our planet. It's great for connectivity, but it might blind us to the cosmos.
Speaking of connectivity issues, did you catch the big Microsoft outage this week?
It was hard to miss. Microsoft 365 just went down globally.
So emails, Teams, SharePoint, all of it. For a huge part of the corporate world, that means work just stops cold.
Completely. It really highlights our fragility, doesn't it? Our incredible dependence on these single monolithic ecosystems. One glitch in a server farm somewhere in Virginia or Dublin, and millions of people around the world literally can't do their jobs.
It is the downside of centralization. When everything runs on the same backbone, everything breaks at the same time.
It's a single point of failure for a huge chunk of the global economy.
Let's move to something that hopefully won't break, or at least will get a serious upgrade. Siri. There are rumors, and they seem to be pretty strong ones, about an Apple February surprise.
Yes, multiple reports are circulating that Apple is going to unveil a Gemini-powered Siri assistant next month.
Okay, so Gemini is Google's big AI model. Apple and Google, the two arch rivals of the mobile world, are teaming up. That seems strange.
It makes a lot of sense if you look at the current landscape. Apple has been, frankly, lagging a bit in the generative AI race. They have the world's best hardware, the iPhone is in everyone's pocket. But Siri, well, Siri has been a bit stagnant for a few years now.
I think stagnant is a kind word for it.
It is. Meanwhile, Google has Gemini, which is an incredibly powerful and capable large language model. So a collaboration allows Apple to immediately jumpstart Siri into becoming a truly smart assistant without having to spend the next 3 years building their own foundational model from scratch.
So Siri might actually be able to answer my question instead of just showing me a list of websites that might contain the answer.
That is the hope. Moving from a simple script reader that recognizes a few keywords to a genuinely integrated personal assistant that understands context, remembers past conversations, and can actually perform complex tasks.
But it also raises some pretty big privacy questions, doesn't it? I mean, Apple's entire brand for the last decade has been built on privacy. What happens on your iPhone stays on your iPhone.
While Google's entire business model is built on data.
Exactly. So how do those two completely opposite philosophies mesh in a single product? If I ask Gemini-powered Siri a question, is that data going to Google's servers? That's a huge question for Apple's user base.
It's the central tension of the deal, and we'll have to see how they navigate it. But it leads directly to the bigger theme in AI for 2026.
It is.
The vibe has completely shifted. It's not just about, look at this cool poem my chatbot wrote anymore. The new question, the one investors are screaming, is, show me the money.
The profitability test.
The profitability test. TechCrunch had a great analysis on this. Companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, the honeymoon phase is over. Investors have poured tens of billions of dollars into developing and training these models, and now they want to see a return on that investment.
We've already seen OpenAI making a big pivot toward the enterprise market.
Yeah.
They hired Barrett Zoff to lead that charge.
That's exactly right. They are aggressively targeting big business, selling customized models, API access, services that can automate corporate workflows. That's where the big money is. And Anthropic has gone on record saying they expect to reach profitability by 2027.
That seems incredibly ambitious for a technology that is notoriously expensive to run.
It's insanely expensive. Every single time you ask a chatbot a question, it burns a significant amount of computing power and electricity in a data center somewhere. It's not free. So the industry is moving from cool experiments and free research previews to this must make money.
And what does that mean for the average user?
It means we're going to see fewer free, unlimited tools and a lot more walled gardens, more subscriptions, more enterprise-level products. The Gallup poll you mentioned is key here. It shows that Americans are now actually using AI at work for real utility, not just for novelty.
Right, it's becoming a tool, like Excel or email.
And once it becomes an essential tool, that's when companies can start charging real money for it. The free lunch is ending.
Speaking of tools becoming more autonomous, Tesla has finally launched its robo-taxi service in Austin, Texas.
Austin really is the testing ground for the future, isn't it? You've got Army Futures Command, you've got the tech scene, and now this.
And this launch is significant because of their transition plan. Initially, they have human safety monitors in the driver's seat.
Right, just in case the car gets confused by a plastic bag blowing across the road or a particularly tricky intersection. A human is there to take over.
But the plan is to transition to fully driverless, no human in the car at all, very quickly.
Which is a very bold move, considering the intense regulatory scrutiny that other robotaxi companies like Cruise and Waymo have faced in places like San Francisco. Tesla is jumping in head first.
Okay, let's step back from the future for a moment and take a look at the past. Because apparently we've been wrong about a few things. Our next section is rewriting the past. And I have to say, the headline about hippo teeth really caught me off guard.
I thought you might like that one. It's from a new study of ancient medical texts from the Renaissance period. Researchers were analyzing the residues found in old medicine jars and cross-referencing them with medical recipes.
And they found some creative ingredients.
Creative is a gentle way of putting it. They found clear references to medicines containing residues of human feces, powdered lizards, and yes, powdered hippo teeth.
Hippo teeth in Renaissance Europe. My first question is, why? My second question is, how? How does a hippo tooth even get to a pharmacy in 16th century Florence?
That is the truly fascinating part. I mean, forget the grossness for a second, though it is very gross. Think about the logistics. Hippos are native to sub-Saharan Africa. To get a hippo tooth to Europe in the 1500s requires a massive, complex, and dangerous trade network.
It's not like you could just order it on Amazon.
Not at all. It had to be hunted in Africa, traded to merchants, probably moved up the Nile or along the coast to a port in Egypt or North Africa, sold to traders there, shipped across the Mediterranean. I mean, it's an incredible journey.
So they had globalization, they just used it to import questionable dental remedies.
Exactly. It highlights that the world was deeply interconnected long before we had container ships and airplanes. But it also highlights the trial and error nature of pre-modern medicine. And it was mostly error. They were desperate for cures for things like the plague or syphilis, and they would try anything, no matter how exotic or bizarre it sounded.
Speaking of globalization and disease, we have an absolute bombshell regarding the history of syphilis.
This is a total rewrite of the history books, a complete reversal of what most of us taught in school.
So the old story, the one we all learned, was that Christopher Columbus and his crew contracted syphilis in the Americas and brought it back to Europe in 1492. It was often called the Columbian Exchange.
Right. It was seen as this terrible biological consequence of contact. Europe got syphilis, the Americas got smallpox.
And it was always blamed on the explorer.
Always. But new DNA analysis of ancient skeletons from Brazil and Colombia has found definitive syphilis DNA, the bacteria Treponema pallidum in skeletons dating back 5,500 years.
5,500 years. It's thousands of years before Columbus even thought about getting on a boat.
Exactly, thousands of years. So syphilis, or at least a form of it, was endemic in the Americas long, long before any European contact. But here's where the story gets even more nuanced.
Go on.
Other recent studies have also found evidence of similar strains of Treponema bacteria in pre-Columbian Europe as well, causing diseases like yaws or Bajol. So this challenges the simple, he brought it back, or they brought it there, narratives entirely.
So it wasn't a one-way street.
It suggests that this whole family of nasty bacteria has been plaguing humanity globally for millennia. It didn't need a boat to become a global problem. It was already there, evolving in different parts of the world simultaneously.
We also have a similar rewrite on the diversity of Roman Britain, centering on the beachy head woman.
This is a classic example of how modern DNA technology completely corrects our assumptions based on, old portraits or stereotypes. They found a Roman-era skeleton in East Sussex in England near the cliffs of Beachy Head.
And for years, the assumption was she was a local Briton who lived under Roman rule.
That was the logical assumption. But a new detailed DNA analysis shows she was of sub-Saharan African descent.
Wow, so Roman Britain wasn't just white Europeans.
Far from it. We have to remember that the Roman Empire was a massive, multi-ethnic, multicultural machine. It stretched from Scotland to Iraq. People moved constantly. Troops, merchants, administrators, slaves, they were all transferred from one end of the empire to the other.
So a woman born in, say, modern-day Sudan could have ended up living and dying on the coast of England.
It was entirely possible. Her life proves that diversity in Britain isn't a modern phenomenon, it's ancient history. The borders were porous in ways we often forget.
Okay, I have to ask about the giant kangaroos, because I have this mental image of a giant non-hopping kangaroo just sort of lumbering around like a bear, and apparently that image was wrong.
Well, your image might have to be updated again. For a while, there was a prevailing scientific theory that Procoptodon, the Ice Age giant kangaroo.
How giant are we talking?
We're talking about a beast that stood over 2 meters tall, maybe 6.5 feet, and weighed over 200 kilograms, so nearly 500 pounds.
That's a huge animal.
It's a monster. And the theory was it was simply too big and heavy to hop efficiently. The idea was that it would have walked on 2 legs, like a person or maybe a T-Rex. A strolling giant kangaroo.
A strolling giant kangaroo. It's a great image, but wrong.
It seems so. A new, very detailed biomechanical study of the bone structure, particularly the ankle and hip joints, says no. They were built for hopping. The skeletal structure could absolutely handle the immense stress of a 500-pound animal bounding across the landscape.
That is genuinely terrifying. Imagine a 500-pound kangaroo hopping towards you at high speed.
Australia's megafauna was truly something else. And speaking of strange creatures, let's go from the dry Australian outback to the deepest parts of the ocean.
Oh, okay.
Japanese researchers on a deep-sea expedition found something they'd never seen before. These strange black eggs at a depth of 6,000 meters off the coast of Japan.
Black eggs sounds like the start of a very creepy science fiction movie.
It does. But it turned out to be something a bit more mundane, but still incredible. They were flatworm cocoons. But what's so amazing is the environment they survive in. At 6,000 meters down, the pressure is 600 times that of the atmosphere at sea level. It's enough to crush a military submarine. And yet these jet black cocoons, which have this weird pearl-like sheen, are perfectly adapted to it.
It's another reminder that alien life basically exists right here on Earth, just in places that are incredibly hard for us to get to.
Exactly. It's life, but not as we know it.
All right, let's come up for air and look at the map, the geopolitical map, because our next section is where things get very, very serious. The Pentagon has released its 2026 National Defense Strategy, the NDS, and there is a major pivot.
This is arguably the most significant shift in stated U.S. defense policy in at least a decade, maybe longer.
And the headline is that the Pentagon has officially dropped China as the top priority.
Which is shocking. For years, all we have heard from defense circles from both parties is great power competition, the pacing challenge of China, 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 and now suddenly it's not the #1 priority.
So what is
The new stated focus is homeland defense and the security of the Western Hemisphere.
This sounds like a complete reversal of 80 years of American foreign policy. I mean, since World War II, the entire strategy has been fight over there so we don't have to fight over here. The idea of forward presence in Europe and Asia, this sounds like Fortress America.
That is exactly what analysts are calling it. It aligns perfectly with the current administration's America First foreign policy doctrine. It implies a significant move toward a more isolationist or at least a more defensive posture.
What's the message being sent to allies?
The message being sent to allies in Europe and Asia is very clear. We are securing our own borders and our own hemisphere first. You need to shoulder more of your own defense burden. You need to be prepared for more limited U.S. support.
That is a terrifying message if you're in Taiwan or South Korea or Ukraine or one of the Baltic states.
It is. It fundamentally changes the security calculus for every nation that has been living under the American security umbrella since 1945. If the U.S. is looking inward, the rest of the world has to rearm and fast.
So we're shifting from a strategy of deterrence by denial, stopping an adversary from achieving their objective, to a strategy of deterrence by resilience, which is basically saying, we can survive whatever you throw at us here at home.
Which, as you said, terrifies allies. Because if you are Japan, Fortress America doesn't help you much if your shipping lanes are being threatened.
This inward focus might also explain some of the weirdness surrounding the whole Greenland situation.
The Greenland saga, it just continues to bubble away.
So, to recap for everyone, President Trump had expressed a strong desire to buy Greenland from Denmark. Denmark and Greenland both said absolutely not for sale. Trump got angry, and now he's retreating.
He has officially retreated on the public threats to try and force a sale. The reporting suggests the diplomatic fallout was becoming too heavy. The Danish royal family, which is very respected, reportedly expressed personal hurt over the tone of the rhetoric. And to smooth things over, Trump is now publicly praising UK troops and trying to shift focus.
It feels like a very chaotic, very personal style of diplomacy, a game of Risk played on Twitter.
It's rhetorical volatility. But there is a deeper theme here that connects to that Fortress America idea. Trump has been floating this concept of a new world order and a board of peace, which seems to be an attempt to bypass traditional diplomatic structures like the UN or NATO.
How would that work?
It seems to be a move away from established multilateral alliances and toward personal transactional deals. I'll make a deal with this leader, I'll make a deal with that leader. No broad treaty alliances, just a series of individual contracts between nations. It's a very different way of looking at the world.
Speaking of transactional deals and threats, let's talk about trade. The U.S. is threatening a 100% tariff on all Canadian imports.
Yes, a 100% tariff.
That is a massive economy-killing threat. What's the condition?
The condition is if Canada signs a new major trade deal with China.
And what triggered this?
The Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, recently visited China and, in a speech, called them a reliable partner. That one phrase seems to have triggered the threat from Washington.
So the U.S. is essentially saying, you are either in our economic bloc or you are against us. A 100% tariff on Canadian goods would be catastrophic for both economies.
It would be devastating. The supply chains for everything from cars to food are so deeply integrated across the border, you can't just turn off that tap without causing absolute chaos. It's economic nuclear rhetoric.
But at the same time, in a way that seems almost paradoxical, the U.S. is allowing China to buy Venezuelan oil.
I know it sounds completely contradictory, but here's the nuance, and it's all about control. The U.S. is allowing the sale of Venezuelan oil to China, but they're putting a floor on the price.
What does that mean?
It means they are telling China, you can buy this oil to meet your energy needs, but you cannot buy it at a deep undercut discount. They don't want China propping up the Venezuelan regime with cheap oil purchases that would also disrupt global energy markets.
So it's a complex economic web where they're trying to control the flow of money and resources without completely freezing the entire global market. They want the oil to flow, but they want to control who profits from it and by how much.
It's a very delicate and very risky balancing act.
It is a dizzying array of conflicts and pressures. Which brings us to our next section, global crises. Let's start with the war in Ukraine. We had a new round of peace talks in Abu Dhabi and Davos.
And they failed completely. The trilateral talks between the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine ended without any breakthrough whatsoever.
And on the ground, the situation is getting worse, particularly for civilians. Russia is continuing these massive attacks on the Ukrainian power grid.
The latest reports mention a wave of 400 drones and missiles in a single 24-hour period, almost all of them targeting energy infrastructure.
It's a brutal strategy as winter really sets in. They're trying to freeze the population into submission.
And there's now a desperate international call for an electrical ceasefire, a specific agreement to stop hitting the power grid. But from a military perspective, Russia sees the grid as a legitimate target to degrade Ukraine's ability to wage war and to break civilian morale.
We're also seeing reports of a new massive mobilization effort being planned in Ukraine, drafting up to 2 million people.
That is the number being floated. It shows the sheer scale of attrition this war has caused. If you are at a point where you need to draft up to 2 million more people, you are preparing for a long, grinding, bloody war of attrition, not a quick resolution. It implies they expect this to go on for years.
And yet, despite the failure of the official talks, we know that President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is currently in Moscow meeting with President Putin.
That back channel is still open, but talking and agreeing are two very, very different things.
Meanwhile, in the Middle East, the rhetoric is heating up to a boiling point. Iran's leadership has warned its finger is on the trigger.
And President Trump responded by warning that Iran could be wiped off the face of the earth. We have U.S. warships moving into the region. It is an extremely high-stakes standoff.
There was one small glimmer of a possible off-ramp, a rumor that Hamas might agree to disarm under certain conditions.
There are reports, yes, that Hamas might agree to lay down its arms in exchange for safe passage for its leadership or some kind of future political role, but skepticism among regional analysts is extremely high.
We've heard similar things before.
Many times. And until we see weapons actually being turned over and a real verification process, most observers are treating it with extreme caution.
Okay, let's bring the focus closer to home, literally right outside the window for many of our listeners in North America, this massive winter storm.
It is an absolute monster. It's stretching from Texas all the way up to New England. A huge swath of the country is being hit with ice, snow, and freezing rain.
The impact is huge. Over 8,000 flights canceled, millions of people without power. But there's a bizarre political angle to this storm that involves the word ice.
This is a story that is incredibly specific to our current political moment. There was a report, a leaked internal memo, that officials at the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, and FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, were told not to use the word ice when referring to frozen water in their public briefings.
Because it sounds like icy immigration and customs enforcement.
Exactly. The concern was that it would cause confusion or anger amidst the massive protests happening right now against the administration's immigration crackdowns.
That feels like something out of a political satire. But it's real life. We have reached a point where basic weather terminology is considered politically sensitive.
It just shows you how charged and polarized the political atmosphere is. You can't even talk about the weather without tripping over a major political wire. And the context here is very serious.
Right, this isn't happening in a vacuum.
Not at all. This is happening at the same time that businesses in states like Minnesota are closing down in protest of actual ICE raids. It's happening as we get reports of a second fatal shooting by federal agents during one of these immigration enforcement operations. So the tension is very real, even if the linguistic censorship seems absurd.
Let's try to find a little bit of light as we head into our final section, culture, sports, and our conclusion. First off, for the gamers out there, some good news. Fable is coming back.
Finally, Playground Games, the developers, confirmed the RPG reboot is set to land in autumn of 2026. It has been a very, very long wait for fans of that franchise.
And the Oscars 2026 nominations are out. It looks like Hamnet is leading the pack.
8 nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director. It's the adaptation of Maggie O'Farrell's incredible novel about Shakespeare's family and the death of his son.
A real tearjerker right here.
Oh, absolutely, but beautifully made. But what's also interesting in the nominations is that a Russian animated film, The Three Sisters, got a nomination for Best Animated Feature.
Which is significant, given the geopolitical tensions we just discussed regarding Ukraine and Russia.
It really is. It shows that art can sometimes slip through the political borders that governments try to close. The Academy is making a statement there saying, we are judging the art, not the politics of the country it came from.
And for the adrenaline junkies, the climber Alex Honnold was attempting to free solo the Taipei 101 skyscraper. That's climbing without ropes.
And he was delayed by rain. It turns out even the greatest free solo climber in history needs good weather. It's being filmed for a Netflix special, so we will get to see it eventually, just not this week.
Let's do a quick sports update. There's some drama in the world of cricket. Bangladesh is boycotting the T20 World Cup.
Yes, over a dispute with the governing body. And in a surprising move, Scotland is replacing them in the tournament. It's a huge shakeup for the cricket world.
And in tennis, Novak Djokovic had another incident, this time at the Australian Open, involving a ball boy.
He is never far from controversy, is he? It seems like every major tournament has a Djokovic headline that isn't about his incredible forehand.
So let's bring all of this together. We've gone from the inside of our own mouths to the edge of the universe and back to a snowstorm. What does it all mean?
I think if you look at the whole board, you see that stark contrast we started with. In the realms of science and space, we are in an era of aggressive, almost unbridled expansion. We are finding things in our bodies, these obelisks, that challenge the very definition of life.
We're seeing black holes that defy the laws of physics we wrote.
We are preparing to send humans back on a path around the moon for the first time in half a century. It's all about pushing outward, learning more, seeing further.
But on the human geopolitical map.
On that map, we are contracting. We're pulling back. The world's leading superpower is shifting its focus to homeland defense. Trade barriers are going up with threats of 100% tariffs. Nations are becoming more suspicious, more insular.
It really feels like we are shifting from an era of, say, post-Cold War global integration to an era of fortress nations.
I think that's exactly right. The theme is consolidation and protection.
Yeah.
Securing the national power grid against Russian missiles. Securing the southern border against migrants. Securing the profit margin for multi-billion-dollar AI companies. It's a more defensive, a more guarded world.
And yet, in the middle of all that defensiveness, all that wall building, we find out there are obelisks that have been living inside our own supposedly secure bodies this whole time.
That is the ultimate irony, isn't it? We try so desperately to control the borders of our nations, but we don't even know what's living inside the borders of our own cells.
So here's my final thought for you to chew on today. If we are just now, in 2026, finding entire new classes of biological entities inside us, these obelisks that have been there for probably thousands of years, completely unnoticed, what else is hiding in plain sight? What fundamental truth is hiding in our politics or our technology or our history that we are just one slightly better microscope or one new perspective away from seeing for the very first time?
It's a humbling thought. We think we know the world, but we are really just scratching the surface.
Thank you so much for helping us connect all these disparate dots today.
My pleasure. It was a fascinating ride.
And to you listening, stay curious, stay safe, especially if you are in the path of that ice or frozen water or however you're being told to call it. And keep diving deep.
You're enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
Welcome to The Debate. It is January 26, 2026. If you've been tracking the headlines over, the last 96 hours, you know that the tectonic plates of global power aren't just shifting, they're colliding. We're witnessing a convergence of events that really spans the entire globe, from the high-stakes trilateral talks in Abu Dhabi to the fracturing of trade alliances in the Andes, from the icy strategic deliberations over Greenland all the way to the streets of Minneapolis. The world is undergoing what former President Trump and a growing chorus of global leaders are calling a new world order. But the question we're tackling today is, what is the nature of this order? Is this a necessary, hard-nosed reset that's designed to break the stagnation of the last decade? Or are we just witnessing the total collapse of stability where the rule of law is being replaced by the rule of the strong?
And it's a question that feels heavier today than perhaps at any point in the last 80 years. I mean, I look at the map this week and I don't see a new order. I see a global fracturing. We're seeing the simultaneous erosion of diplomatic norms and, frankly, humanitarian protections. We're watching the United States exit the World Health Organization while a measles outbreak spreads. We're seeing trade wars erupt between neighbors in South America. And we're seeing peace negotiated in corporate boardrooms while civilians are being targeted on the ground in Eastern Europe and the Levant. To me, this looks less like a reset and more like a return to the law of the jungle, where the very concept of a global community is just being shredded in favor of raw power.
And I certainly won't argue that the transition is gentle. It's not. It's abrasive. It's loud. But let me give you a different perspective. For years, we've lived in a world of performative diplomacy, endless summits that solve nothing, sanctions that leak like sieves, and, alliances that exist only on paper. What we've seen between January 22nd and the 25th is the emergence of a transactional realism. We have trilateral talks in the UAE finally addressing the Ukraine war after 4 years of deadlock. We have a complete restructuring of energy markets involving Venezuela and China that actually makes economic sense. This isn't chaos. It's the sound of the logjam breaking. We are finally prioritizing economic reality and conflict resolution over empty bureaucracy.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that description of resolution. Breaking a logjam by blowing up the river isn't a strategy. It's destruction. You call it transactional realism, I call it coercion. When you look at the pressure being applied, whether it's the threat of 100% tariffs on Canada, our closest ally, or this board of peace that treats Gaza like a distressed asset rather than a humanitarian disaster, you see a pattern. It is a philosophy where the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. That isn't a stable world order, it's a powder keg. And frankly, suggesting that economic reality justifies abandoning international law is exactly how we slid into the great conflicts of the 20th century.
Okay, let's dig into the evidence, because I think the powder keg is exactly what we're moving away from. We have to start with the most significant development of the week, which is the trilateral peace talks in Abu Dhabi involving the United States, Russia, and Ukraine. For nearly 4 years, we've watched a war of attrition in Eastern Europe that has drained treasuries and cost hundreds of thousands of lives. Now, finally, we have Steve Witkoff, the U.S. envoy, a man with a background in high-stakes real estate, not polite diplomacy, sitting down with Russian and Ukrainian counterparts. And Witkoff called these talks constructive. Why? Because for the first time, all parties are facing reality. The U.S. has signaled a massive shift in its national defense strategy, moving toward limited support and prioritizing threats efficiently. This has finally forced Europe to wake up. We see EU military debt climbing because they're taking responsibility for their own defense. This pressure brought everyone to the table. That is a success.
A success? I come at it from a different way entirely. You mentioned Steve Witkoff's background as a positive, but treating a sovereign nation's survival like a real estate acquisition is precisely the problem. While those constructive talks were happening in the comfort of the UAE, a neutral ground chosen specifically to bypass European oversight, I might add, Russian drones were striking the power grids in Kyiv and Kharkiv. An ambulance was hit in Kherson. Over 1 million people were left without electricity in the middle of a brutal winter. That isn't a negotiation tactic. That is a war crime happening in tandem with diplomacy. It signals that this new world order tolerates brutality as leverage.
Leverage is how wars end. The previous administration's strategy of as long as it takes was a slogan, not a policy.
But look at the rhetoric surrounding the talks. You have Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban in Davos saying clearly that Russia will never accept NATO on its borders, and calling President Zelensky a man in a desperate position. The reality you claim is being faced is simply the abandonment of Ukraine. If the deal being cooked up in Abu Dhabi forces Ukraine to capitulate territory because the West decided it was too expensive to support democracy, that's not a breakthrough, that's a betrayal of the UN Charter. It sends a message to every dictator on the planet. If you hold out long enough and bomb enough power grids, the West will eventually cut a deal to save money.
That's an interesting point. Though I would frame it differently. The UN Charter didn't stop the tanks from rolling in 4 years ago. Acknowledging the security map as it exists, not as we wish it existed, is the only path to stopping the killing. And frankly, the geopolitical chessboard is being rearranged to make that possible on a global scale, not just in Europe. I mean, look at the economic maneuvering we saw this week regarding Latin America. This is where the genius of the transactional approach shines, and where the critics miss the nuance. The U.S. administration has officially allowed China to purchase Venezuelan oil. On the surface, it looks like a concession, right?
It looks like propping up the Maduro regime and inviting our biggest rival into our backyard.
That's the superficial read. But look at the mechanism. The U.S. is allowing the purchase, but, and this is critical, they are enforcing strict banking and insurance controls that prevent China from buying it at the undercut prices they enjoyed under the black market sanctions regime. Previously, China was getting Venezuelan oil at a 30% discount because it was contraband. Now they have to pay full Brent crude market rates. This drains China's foreign reserves while simultaneously bringing supply back online to stabilize global prices. And at the same time, we see Venezuela pushing a new hydrocarbon law to attract foreign investment and modernize their grid. It is using economic levers to manage both an adversary, China, and a rogue state, Venezuela, without firing a single shot. It is pragmatic, efficient, and it keeps the global economy turning.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you are looking at the balance sheet and ignoring the geopolitical fracturing that this transactionalism causes on the ground. You talk about Latin America as if it's just an oil well, but look at the region politically. It's disintegrating. We have a trade war erupting between Colombia and Ecuador right now. Colombia has cut off electricity exports. Ecuador is slapping tariffs on imports. Why? Because when the global superpower signals that everyone is on their own and that deals matter more than alliances, well, that ethos trickles down. We are seeing the balkanization of South America. This is the result of a world where transactional politics replaces cooperative frameworks.
Or it's the result of nations finally acting in their own self-interest, rather than pretending to be a happy family.
But self-interest without guardrails is chaos. And regarding the U.S. strategy, it's inconsistent to the point of schizophrenia. You praise the deal allowing China to buy Venezuelan oil to stabilize markets, yet in the same breath, former President Trump is threatening Canada with 100% tariffs if they make a trade deal with China. You can't claim to be a free market realist in Caracas and a protectionist bully in Ottawa.
It's not inconsistent. It's about hierarchy and leverage.
It's bullying an ally. The U.S. is threatening to blow up the USMCA, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, the very bedrock of North American trade, because Canada wants to diversify its economy. The USMCA has specific clauses, sure, but threatening 100% tariffs is a nuclear option. You cannot claim to be building a stable order when you are treating your neighbors like vassals. This doesn't secure the perimeter, it destroys trust. If Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. aren't in lockstep based on mutual respect, North America becomes weaker, not stronger.
I strongly disagree. The threat of tariffs on Canada is a rational defensive measure. We are in a great power competition. The USMCA has a poison pill clause regarding non-market economies for a reason. If Canada opens the back door to Chinese economic influence, it undermines the security of the entire continent. The U.S. is right to demand that its allies choose a side. This isn't bullying. It is perimeter security. And speaking of perimeter security, look at the Arctic. The headlines about Greenland this week. Trump's framework of future deal, despite the Danish prime minister's rejection. People laugh at it, calling it an imperial tantrum, but they miss the strategic imperative.
Oh, I don't think they miss the imperative. They just reject the morality of it.
Morality doesn't mine rare earth minerals. Greenland is the strategic high ground of the future. It holds the largest undeveloped deposits of rare earths outside of China. It sits on key shipping lanes, and it is vital for missile defense.
A transactional worldview recognizes that we cannot let that territory fall under Chinese or Russian influence just because we want to be polite to Denmark. It's not about vanity, it's about securing the raw materials of 21st century power. If we don't secure it, someone else will.
That is a compelling argument if you view the world solely as a game of risk. But have you considered the cost of treating sovereign nations like real estate listings? The Danish Prime Minister had to come out and explicitly say Greenland is not for sale and that sovereignty is a red line. When the U.S. treats Denmark, a NATO ally, with such dismissive arrogance, it validates every critic who says the West is just as imperialist as the East. And the fallout is tangible. Look at Japan. Relations with China are souring over Taiwan, and now we see the symbolic departure of the pandas from Tokyo.
The pandas? Come on.
Symbols matter. The return of the pandas to China marks the end of panda diplomacy and the start of a cold silence in Asia. It signals that cultural and diplomatic bridges are being burned. We are alienating allies in Europe and the Arctic while tensions rise in the Pacific. That is not a strategy for security. It is a strategy for isolation. We are creating a world where no one trusts Washington. They just fear it. And fear is a decaying asset.
Isolation or consolidation? We're shedding the dead weight of globalism that wasn't working. You mentioned the World Health Organization earlier. The U.S. officially exiting the WHO this week is exactly what I mean by shedding dead weight. The argument is that these institutions are bloated, politicized, and ineffective. By stepping out, the U.S. forces a reform or creates a parallel structure that actually works. We see the same logic applied to the Middle East with the new Board of Peace.
The Board of Peace. Let's talk about that Orwellian phrasing. This initiative, announced at Davos, backed by 25 nations, is supposed to oversee Gaza's reconstruction. But notice the structure. It's a board. It sounds like a corporate restructuring of a bankrupt company. Meanwhile, on the ground, the humanitarian situation in Gaza is catastrophic. We have reports of skyrocketing prices, starvation, and a healthcare system that has collapsed. The UN is pleading for access, but the U.S. is bypassing the UN entirely to create this board.
Because the UN failed. For decades, the UN has managed the conflict without resolving it. The Board of Peace brings capital and security guarantees together. We even have reports, credible media reports, that Hamas is agreeing to disarm in exchange for passage and political survival. That is a massive development. If, and I emphasize if, this transactional approach leads to the disarmament of Hamas and the rebuilding of Gaza, doesn't matter that it bypassed the UN bureaucracy, results matter more than process. If a corporate board can stop the bleeding where the Security Council couldn't, then maybe the corporate board is the better model.
But at what cost to the human beings living there? This transaction treats the Palestinian people as an obstacle to be managed, not a people with a right to self-determination. It frames peace as a business deal, investment in exchange for submission. And this brings me to a deeper, more disturbing point. This philosophy, this idea that security is something imposed by force from the top down, bypassing community trust, is not just happening in Gaza. It is bleeding into domestic policy. Look at what happened in Minnesota this week.
Minnesota? You're pivoting from the Middle East to a domestic police incident?
I am, because the philosophy is identical. In Minneapolis, we saw federal agents, ICE, shoot and kill a man, Alex Preddy, an ICU nurse. They claimed he was a threat, but the community has erupted because they see it as an occupying force acting without accountability. Businesses are closing in solidarity, the streets are full of tear gas. Whether it is a board imposing order on Gaza without Palestinian input, or federal agents imposing order on Minneapolis without community trust, it is the same logic. Force solves problems. Compliance is mandatory. And I'm sorry, but history tells us that force without legitimacy only breeds more violence. You cannot transact your way to safety if the people on the ground feel occupied.
I see the parallel you're drawing, but I think it misses the fundamental duty of the state. Whether it is securing the border in Minnesota or securing the energy grid in Europe, the state's primary job is stability. The messy, chaotic process of the last 20 years, where we worried about everyone's feelings and followed every bureaucratic rule, gave us open borders, a war in Ukraine, and a nuclear-armed Iran. The New World Order you fear is simply the reassertion of boundaries. Yes, it is harsh. When you cut out the rot, it hurts. But look at the stock market. The Dow jumping 400 points because trade wars might be resolving, even if through threats. Capital is voting for this stability. The trilateral talks are happening. The oil is flowing. We are moving from a world of should to a world of is.
Capital might be voting for it, but humanity is paying for it. You say we're moving to a world of is. Well, the is right now looks like this. A world where hunger is weaponized in Gaza. A world where peace in Ukraine means accepting the annexation of territory by an aggressor. A world where small nations from Ecuador to Greenland are pawns to be bought, sold, or starved by superpowers. You call it a hard reset. I call it the erosion of the very civilization we built to prevent World War III. We are dismantling the fire station because we're tired of paying for the trucks, right at the moment the fire is starting to spread.
That's a poetic image, but perhaps the fire station was already burned down, and we were just pretending it stood. We have to face the fact that the old institutions, the UN, the WHO, even traditional NATO structures, were not preventing these fires. They were just watching them burn. This new era, this transactional geopolitics, is an attempt to build something fireproof. It is ugly, yes. It is loud. It involves threats and tariffs and hard bargains. But if it ends the war in Ukraine, if it stabilizes energy markets, and if it creates a security framework that relies on power rather than promises, then it is a necessary evolution.
And I fear it is a devolution. We are validating the idea that might makes right. If the legacy of this New World Order is that international law is optional and sovereignty is negotiable, then no one is safe. Not the people of Ukraine, not the citizens of Taiwan, and ultimately not even the citizens of the superpowers who think they are driving the bus. When you erode the rules for your enemies, you eventually erode them for yourself.
We are certainly at a crossroads. Whether you view this week's events, from the Abu Dhabi talks to the streets of Minneapolis, as a breakthrough or a breakdown depends heavily on your faith in the old system versus your appetite for a new, harsher reality. But the one thing we can say with certainty is that the era of ambiguity is over. Lines are being drawn.
Precisely. And while the leaders in Davos and Washington trade tariffs and territories, the reality on the ground for the nurse in Minnesota, the family in Gaza, the pensioner in freezing Kyiv remains a struggle for basic dignity in a world that seems to value it less and less.
On that, we can agree. The era of global stability, as we knew it, is over. Every nation and every citizen is now scrambling to find their footing on this shifting ground. Thank you for listening to the debate.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.